Hi, OpenXML friends. Today I'm going to walk through the process of building an ASP.NET application that enables an end user to upload a docx, then convert that docx to an HTML page and display that HTML page in this ASP.NET application. We are going to use Power Tools for OpenXML, and we're going to use the OpenXML SDK. In addition to this functionality, we're also going to have a little button on this web page that changes the docx in some simple way. And then we're also going to have a button that enables the end user to download that document after it's been modified. These are the four basic operations that developers often need to implement when they're building an ASP.NET application with OpenXML functionality. They need to upload, they need to modify, they need to display, and to download. So let's get started. Here I am in Visual Studio 2013. The code that I present in this screencast, it'll work just fine with other releases of Visual Studio. If you're using Visual Studio 2010 or 2012, you can relatively easily adapt this code for your platform. First thing I'll do is create a new solution. I'm creating a web application using .NET Framework 4.5. I want to create one of these ASP.NET web applications, and you can name the project whatever you want, and you can place it wherever you want. That's not really relevant to this demonstration. I'll create an empty web app. First thing we need to do is we need to add the references for the OpenXML SDK. We'll find the OpenXML SDK in the extensions over here. And another thing we need to add is we need to add a reference to Windows Base, because that's the assembly that contains system.io.packaging. Next thing we need to do is download a copy of Power Tools for OpenXML. Go to powertools.codeplex.com and click on the Downloads tab. For this demonstration, you're going to want Power Tools for OpenXML version 3.1.05 or later. I'll save the zip file as a sibling to the web application one that I just created. I'll open the folder. I want to extract this into a directory named oxpt, so the easiest way to do this is rename the zip file to oxpt.zip. Right click, drag, tell it I want to extract files, and the directory that it tells me is just fine because I renamed the zip file to oxpt. Now we have an oxpt directory. One thing that you're going to want to do is to unblock all these files so that you don't get extraneous warnings from various things indicating that you've downloaded this from the web. Easiest way to do that is in Windows Explorer, type in PowerShell _ISE, and that'll start a PowerShell integrated scripting environment at this location just by entering in PowerShell _ISE into the address bar of Windows Explorer. And now I can enter the command dir ***recurse and pipe that into unblock file. And we can exit that. Now, back in Visual Studio, I can add the Power Tools for OpenXML project to this solution. So I'll right-click on Solution and I'll tell it I want to add an existing project. Browse to where you put the oxpt directory and go into OpenXML Power Tools, and let's add this OpenXML Power Tools.csproj to our solution. I now want to add a reference to OpenXML Power Tools here in my references for my web application. So I'll tell it I want to add a reference. I'll go to Solutions, and there is my OpenXML Power Tools solution, and I'll click OK. We're now ready to start putting together our web application. I'll right-click on the web application and tell it that I want to add a new item. And for this example, I'm going to demonstrate this using a web form. The basic principles here will work no matter what type of application you need to work with. First thing I'm going to add to this web form is I'll add a file upload control. Now, just to make things display in a nice way, I'll add a paragraph in between all of these controls to give a little bit of space. Now I'll add a label into this web form. We need a place to put messages as we operate the various controls in this web form. I'll name it LBL message, and I'll get rid of the text there. Add another paragraph for spacing. Now I need an upload button, a modify button, a display button, and a download button. So I'll grab a button there. I'll call the ID btn upload and change this to upload. Then I'll copy and paste that. There's my modify, display, and download. I'll pop over to the design mode, double click on the upload tab. That will give me a click event for the upload tab. Double click on the modify, same thing. Double click on display and double click on download. Now I'll paste in a bit of code for the upload button. I see I've forgotten to do something. I need to name my file upload control as file upload control. So I'll come back over here to the web form and I'll rename this as file upload control. And now that resolves. We have some other things here that need to be resolved. So I'll right click on that unresolved symbol and tell it I want a using system.io, and that will put the using system.io up in the using statements at the top of the file. I need Open XML Power Tools. I generally like to put this using down at the end. I need a using document format.openxml.packaging. This file upload control .has file. This is standard programming with the file upload control. This code calls a Power Tools for OpenXML method to determine whether the file name has a proper docx extension. There's this util.is word processing ML method that tells whether we have a word processing ML type of file. So this would enable docx and docm and docx and docm. The code then news up a memory stream with the constructor that takes no arguments, and this creates a resizable memory stream. We then write the bytes from the file upload control into that memory stream. By doing it this way, we can then open the document for reading and for writing. There is an argument to memory stream that takes a byte array, but if we use that constructor to instantiate our memory stream object, it creates a non-resizable memory stream, and that's okay so long as we only want to open the document for reading. But if we want to open it for writing, which we very well may want to do, then we use this idiom where we new up the memory stream with a constructor with no arguments, and then we write the byte array into the memory stream. The next thing that my code does here is it opens up the word processing document and does nothing with it. But this is there just to make sure that this document is openable. If there's something dramatically wrong with this document, then we don't want to try to open this document and see that error at the point where we display the document. We want to know ahead of time that this document at least can be opened by the OpenXML SDK. And if the file is opened successfully, then it sets the message to file uploaded successfully, and it saves the byte array and the file name from user into session state. If the document wasn't openable, then the OpenXML SDK is going to throw an exception right here, and that'll get caught down here, and that message will be put into our label message. The rest of this here is just boilerplate to make sure that they have specified a file, and if they haven't specified a file of the right type, we need to tell them that they have not uploaded a word processing document or what have you. Let's add some code for the modify button. I'll paste a bit of code in here. First thing that we do is get that byte array out of the session state. And if that byte array is null, then that means we don't currently have a file loaded. So we give them an appropriate message down here: you have not specified a file. Otherwise, we new up the memory stream, we write the byte array into the memory stream. We then can open up the word processing document for read write. That's what this true variable right here tells us. And then the next thing that we do is we execute this bit of code right here, which is standard OpenXML code to modify a document. All that this code does is create a new paragraph and append this paragraph after the last paragraph in the document. Now this paragraph class is not resolved, so I'll click up here and I'll tell it I want to have a using document format.openxml.word processing. We're done with that method. Now let's address this button to display that docx as HTML. This is the crux of this particular application. I'll paste a bit of code in there. One thing that we have to do when displaying a document as HTML is there needs to be a place to put that HTML page, and there needs to be a place to put all of the images that that HTML page is going to refer to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a static variable with this constant right here. I'll pop that string in right there. There are about 1,000 different ways that you can store information and retrieve information in ASP.NET web applications. This is about the simplest way that one can do this. We use this server.mapPath function here, which is in ASP.NET, to give us the root path of our particular web application. And we'll have permissions to create a directory, and we'll have permissions to create files in that directory, ASP.NET. So what this code does is it creates that directory if it doesn't exist, and then it gets a new GUID. It's going to convert this docx that has been loaded into session state. It's going to convert it into an HTML file, and it's going to name that HTML file with a GUID.html. We just need some place where we can put an HTML page. We need to know that that name of that page is going to be unique. You can, of course, alter the approach that you use here to store your HTML files. You may want to name this HTML file the same thing as the original document name, and you know that you're going to have 10 or 20 or 30 files, and that there's never going to be a conflict in names in this directory. Or you may have a system whereby you can enable end users to upload any arbitrary document, and you may need to protect against conflicts of names. I'll leave this for you to figure out per your scenario. We then pass the byte array that we got from session state, our converted docs directory, and our HTML file name to this convert to HTML method. I'll paste that in here. I need to resolve some of these. I'll right click on image format, and I'll tell it that I need a using system.drawing.imaging. This code uses linked XML, so I'll right click here, tell it I want to have a using system.xml.link, and I need a using system.text to resolve this issue here. We want to save this file in this GUID named HTML file with UTF-8 encoding. Let's walk through this method in detail. As usual, first thing we do is we new up a memory stream with no constructors, and then we write that byte array into the memory stream. We then open up the word processing document, and we need to set up the directory name for the directory where we're going to store all of the image files. This directory name will also have the GUID in there, and it'll have underscore files appended to that GUID. It has to set up two of these. First of all, this image directory full name, this is going to be the location where the HTML converter is going to write those images. And then we need the relative name here, and this is what we're going to use for the link in the HTML to link to those images. The code then gets the page title out of the document if that page title exists. It initializes an image counter because it names the images something like image 1, image 2, image 3, so that we can link to all of these images as appropriate in the HTML that we generate. The way that you use HTML converter is that you have this image handler, which I initialized to a lambda expression right here. And in this image handler, what it does is it gets handed an image info from HTML converter, and its job is to convert the image to whatever form that you want to convert it to, save that image, and then it returns the IMG element that gets inserted into the HTML at that particular location. So if we drop down here, we can see where we new up the IMG element. We specify for the source attribute the image relative directory name, and followed by a slash, and then followed by the image file name. This is a pretty flexible infrastructure. Your job in this lambda expression is save that image somewhere, and then create the image element so that it refers to that image so that your web server can find that image. This takes a relatively simplistic approach where it just stores the image in a files directory that is a sibling to the GUID named HTML file, and the references to those images are just relative references of the image directory relative name followed by the image file name. Then it calls HTML converter and gets back an X element that contains the HTML for the page that we want to display. You'll note this comment right here that indicates that the HTML tree that you get back from HTML converter contains entity references. If you don't do exactly the right thing when you get the HTML back from HTML converter, it could possibly corrupt those entity references. However, something that we're doing, which is just as easy as anything, is we're going in and we're modifying the page here, adding a link into the page so that we can go back to the upload page. This is an allowable operation with this. What we're not allowed to do here is to let linked XML actually clone this tree, because linked XML won't clone the tree properly. We need those Xentity items in the tree, and if we let linked XML clone the tree, it won't do it properly because linked XML is not aware of the Xentity class. But what we can do is we can just go into this HTML and we can add new elements. This won't corrupt those Xentity items in the tree. For further explanation, you can go to this link and read all about how you can put entity references in a linked XML tree and have them serialized properly. And last thing that this method does is it writes the HTML to that file that has a GUID name. And the last thing we need to do to this little application is that we need to paste in the code that enables the end user to download this file after we've modified it. Now I'll paste that code into this method. In a similar way, it double checks to make sure that the byte array is not equal to null, and then it uses this boilerplate code here to enable the end user to download that file. We're all done here. Let's first of all make sure that we can build this application, and it succeeded in building. Now let's run it. Here we are, we're running our little web application. First thing to do is grab a file and upload it. And it tells us that the file uploaded successfully. Let's now display the file, and we can see that this file is displayed. Let's take a look at that file. Here's the file in Microsoft Word, and here's the file in our web page. You can see it's a pretty good likeness. I'll go back to the upload page. I'll grab a second file, I'll upload it and display it, and this displayed very nicely. One thing that's kind of cool about this particular version, here is a document in the Chinese language, and it uses numbered list items that use Chinese numbering. Let's look at this file in our document browser. I'll open it up here, I'll upload that file, and I'll display the file. And you can see that with version 3.1.05 and later, the HTML converter does a pretty good job of rendering numbered items in a Chinese document. Now let's exercise the functionality to add text to a document. I'll go back to this test 01. I'll upload that document, and now I'll tell it to modify the document, and it tells me a paragraph was added to the docx. Let's display that fellow, and if we come down to the bottom of the document, sure enough, it says hello world right there in the default font, because that's how we set up that particular paragraph, just to use the default font and the default style. And finally, I can download this file after it's been modified. So let's open it up using Word. Of course, Word will give me this message that be careful, files from the internet can contain viruses. I know where this file came from, so I'll enable editing. And if I go down to the bottom of the document, sure enough, I can see the hello world down at the bottom of the document. So there you have it. We've built a little ASP.NET web application. We've enabled end users to upload files. You can write code to modify those files using the OpenXML SDK. Then, as appropriate, I've given you all of the plumbing code necessary to convert that file to HTML, including if that file has images, it saves all the images in a good location on your web server so that the HTML page can refer to those images. And then finally, you can enable the end users to download that file to their local hard drive. That's all I'm going to cover in this video. Come back to OpenXML Developer often and see what new content we're producing. I announce all of the changes that I make to the OpenXML SDK and to Power Tools for OpenXML on the blog at openxmldeveloper.org. You can also follow OpenXML Dev on Twitter, and you can follow me on Twitter at EricWhiteDev. Thanks for watching.